Welcome to the Comic Binge. I am your host, Paul Herman, and today we are talking about Deadpool comic books in honor and in fever pitch excitement for Wolverine or Deadpool Wolverine. It should be Wolverine Deadpool, but that's a whole different podcast, you could say. But anyway, I'm excited. We're going to be talking about Deadpool comic books with a crazy lineup today of guests I'm very excited to have on. But if you haven't already, get all this pleasantry bull crap out of the way. Go, please subscribe to the Comic Binge. I appreciate everyone already has, and select the like button and all that. And special shout out to my homeboy Angshuman for the Love of Comics. He said some very nice things from his live stream the other day. Sure appreciate that, homie. I hope we have you on again soon. But anyway, let's get our guest on here. Very excited to get them on. We'll get the the Canadian himself, Carlos.
Hey,
Carlos,
how are you?
Today?
I'm doing well, man. You know what? It's only fitting that the big movie of the week is fronted by two Canadian characters, at least one actual Canadian, and so you had to put the call out to your token Canadian guest. So
Dude,
it worked out, man.
That's crazy. I didn't even think about that. You're right. Because Wolverine's Canadian, and then Ryan Reynolds is Canadian.
Yeah,
there's Canadian ties everywhere. You can't escape it. You can't escape it.
That's the way it goes, and I don't imagine you have too big a cadre of guys from Alberta like one James Howlett. So seeing as he's entering the universe, you have to reach out to your boy.
Speaking of James Howlett, we're gonna have to cover that soon. You put yourself on the table with that comment right there, sir. Just
Very good.
You dropped that deep nugget. You've earned yourself a seat at the table, sir. That's all I gotta say. All right, thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate you always coming on, and you're coming on next month.
I am.
We've got I've got my buddy Zach. I think he's a Transformers fan, so. We've got
dope.
Yeah, so he and by the way, really quick, he didn't even know it existed when I was telling him about it.
Oh, really?
Like, what? Yeah, I told him he's not really in like the I'll have to let him explain it. But yeah, I was telling him about Void Rivals. He goes, "Oh, what is it? Is it like Transformers?" I'm like, no, homie, it is Transformers. He's like, what? So it was funny. It was a good time. It was a good time. So
that's awesome, man. I'm looking forward to talking to somebody else whose mind was blown by how they did that whole thing.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. I haven't read it yet, but it's going to be a really fun conversation. Next on the docket, we've got Ryan, newcomer, but not newcomer to me. Ryan lives in my heart, my football heart, and someone I talk to football a lot on the old X, formerly Twitter. Brian's the first time he's been on a show of ours, and it's been a long time coming. So thank you for coming on, sir.
Oh, I appreciate you having me. This is really exciting. I'm a big comic fan and X-Men fan, X Factor, those going back to like the early 80s.
Whoa, so X Factor. Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
X Factor. Who's your favorite original X Factor member?
So my favorite comic book character of all time is Archangel.
Nice.
So the whole storyline of Warren and then being kidnapped or taken out of time by Apocalypse and given the metal wings and the blue skin, and maybe someday we'll get a good movie version, but we haven't had that yet.
Maybe
that's my favorite character of all time.
Dude, we must have some connection because my older brother, who also loves football, big giant. I've told you about my brother, huge Archangel fan. Huge. In fact, when we were kids, he would like that was his character. So he bought like a bunch of the X Factor comics, like the Inferno stuff, when like the X-Men and the X Factor were going at it for a minute, So like Archangel, I have a big fondness for Archangel myself. So I totally get it.
The Inferno run and the Extinction Agenda run are my two favorite like sagas.
Well, sir, you put yourself at the seat of the table for the Extinction Agenda show when I eventually. And I mean, I love Extinction.
Good. That's a great 9-parter.
You're on that one too. I got you. Attaboy. So anyway, I'm glad. Me and Ryan have been buds for a while, and I'm glad to finally get him on the show. And And again, it's good to have you on. Thanks again for taking your time out today for both of you, obviously. But yeah. So last but not least, we've got the man, the myth, the legend, Sketchcraft, Robbie D. Rob, how we doing?
Hey,
Hey.
I made it. Hey, speaking of Canadians, I am also gainfully employed by one. So,
Oh.
Yeah.
There you go.
all right, okay,
All right.
So shout out
That's
to
a good-
Canada. Right?
Yeah. So that's a good segue for what we're going to be really quickly for you, Rob, because Rob is, we had to do this on a Monday. I usually do it on a Tuesday, Wednesday. We did it on a Monday for Rob because Rob is going to San Diego Comic-Con
My
to
bad.
promote the person who's gainfully employed by, who's from Canada, his comic book, Spawn Kills Every
Hey.
Spawn.
Hey,
Hey.
hey.
Spout off, sir. Tell us about
So
the
sorry.
comic book here.
Oh no, Spawn Kills Every Spawn. John Layman's writing it, the writer of Chew. He's done some DC. He's been around a while. You might have heard of him. And it's basically about this character's little Spawny or Chibi Spawn, whatever they're calling him. And he's like the worst Spawn. He wants to be the best Spawn, but rather than work for it, he just decides to try and kill all the other Spawns to be the last Spawn standing. That's it.
Right on.
That's the premise. And then shenanigans ensue.
And this first issue comes out this week.
This week.
So
This week on the 20th. Yeah, man. This week. On the
go out
24th.
there, support Rob, aka Sketchcraft, because the art in this is chef's kiss. Look, the detail in this is ridiculous. Like that's Rob.
Is it? I don't know.
I think it's ridiculous.
I don't know.
Oh man, that's
You know,
phenomenal.
the
How
more
long
I don't
would a
know,
page
guys,
like that take you to do? All those chain
I don't know.
links.
I don't know. Guys, I don't really count hours. I'm not a monthly artist, so I just get what the vision, and then I just make the vision happen. And some of it goes faster, some of it goes slower. It just sort of depends on comfortability, right? Comfortability.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so this is like, I'm looking at this now, I'm like, compared to some of the other stuff I've done, like in issues 3, 4, and 5, I'm like, oh, this is easy days, So
Damn.
yeah.
I'll never forget you posted on your Facebook, like through Sketchcraft. You go, if you can grit it, you can draw it. That's always been I'm not an artist, but when you said that, it's always been stuck in my head. So
What did
you
I
know-
say?
you said if you can grit it, like grid, you grid.
Grid.
You can draw
Okay,
it.
they said grit.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
grid.
yeah,
Yeah, I can't pronounce anything. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I
Um,
mean, all art exists and if you're gonna do storytelling, you want to think in a volume, So
Yeah.
like, long as you can put something in a volume, then you can move it around. Like if you don't know how to draw the top of something, you just draw a 3-dimensional cube and then draw inside the 3-dimensional cube, and you'll be able to rotate anything around you want. Just our minds flatten things out because of stereoscopic. Just tends to flatten things, and then you just want to get 3-dimensional. But it's a cartoony book, and I'm sort of a product of the 90s artists, which is why we're all in here today to talk about probably the king of the artists who came out at the tail end or the beginning, but really hit his full stride at the tail end of the 90s, Mr. Joe Madureira. And this Deadpool book would be the first time I had the chance to experience his art. This and Vanguard issue 3, which came out the same year, by the way, where he drew Savage Dragon versus Vanguard. You're probably missing that one shot. He did. Issues 2 and 3 are great of that series because Jason Pearson did 2, Joe Mad did 3, and I believe Angel Medina did 5. I think 4 or 5, one of those.
Holy shit, dude! I have, and I again, we've talked about. I'm a big Savage Dragon fan, or I was when I was a kid, and I remember I had the Vanguard issue because the cover's so good because it's Vanguard punching like this, and Savage Dragon's like out in this open space, it's so good. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, and the coloring's like way beyond whatever Marvel's doing in this series. So,
Oh yeah,
the Joe Mad Vanguard looks closer to the Joe Mad you realize now, or you think about, like the X-Men one,
Yeah.
because he went right from Vanguard into X-Men, and I just think like it's just more of the refined Joe Mad.
Well, and this is good. This is good because the coloring is interesting. I actually like the color in this book, to be honest. But we'll get into that.
I know.
All right.
I know.
So see, you be nice. All right. So here,
right.
I know Rob is too. He's too.
Works great on newsprint, but it's not good.
That
on
you know what
digital.
that. See, there we go. There we
That's
go.
my
Exactly.
problem.
All right. So, I don't blame you. All right. So let's talk about Deadpool for a second, guys. So really quickly, I'm gonna blow myself up because I want to blow myself up because it's my show, goddamn it, do what I want. But I grew up a Deadpool fan.
Wow.
And this comic book was purchased at not too far from this house, actually. This was purchased at the Lake Stevens 7-Eleven. And this was my brother's copy that I stole from him. And I've had ever since. And you can see. Go ahead.
Do you like to tell people you have a copy of New Mutants, a 9/8, but they just don't know you're just saying 98?
No.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a 9/8, right? See that? I know.
That's good.
know.
I like that.
Wait all year to make that joke.
That's pretty good. Listen, if you guys want to see this thing is beat to shit. Like this thing is not like pristine. I have read the F out of this thing.
It looks well loved, man.
It is well loved. It's cool. I mean, like it's like what if I get like $30 for it, well, maybe, but whatever. This was an important comic. I loved it, and Deadpool was a character that came out of nowhere for us, as kids. If you read comics in the 90s, I think it sounds like all of us did pretty much here. Reading comics in the 90s, he kind of came out of nowhere in New Mutants 98. Rob Liefeld became a hot artist, started dropping, creating tons of great characters like Cable. Not just mention Cable, but Domino. I love Domino. I loved her as a character. And this is also her first appearance in this comic book. Or you could say, AKA Vanessa. Anyway,
Right.
That's all. If you get that reference, you would G. Anyway, so yeah, so Deadpool gets showed up in New Mutants 98, comes out, makes a huge ruckus, and people fall in love with them, comes back in X-Force issue 2, which is really interesting. I just want to, although you guys have a say in this in a second, but it's interesting because this is the second issue of X-Force. This is following one of the biggest selling comic books of all time. And look what's in the left-hand corner. Deadpool's back. So he's already making, and he's the main like thing in this book. Like it's Weapon X, this version of Weapon X, Kane here versus Deadpool. So after following the biggest selling comic of all time, it's Deadpool. It's fascinating to me. And then, after this, he shows up, they show up, in the next couple years of just, keep showing up in X-Force comic books here and there, in the ongoing story, Mr. Tolliver, which plays a very big part in this comic book. We eventually get him in his own miniseries, the Circle Chase, what we're going to talk about today. And then, just kind of circling back here, he gets his next miniseries. Do you know who? I already know who this is or who wrote this, but do you guys know who wrote this? This is going to blow your minds. Mark Waid.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What
I
the
was
hell?
like, what? Mark Waid. So anyway, this comes out. He kind of takes a little bit of this doesn't sell as well. I know that this was not super received great, if I remember correctly. He eventually comes back with his ongoing series in the late 90s by Joe Kelly, which people love. I have not actually read any of this. I know Rob wants to talk. We'll talk about this eventually, Rob, I promise. But, and then from here, you just last about 20 issues, solid ongoing, couple years, kind of disappears, comes back. But this is kind of the initial foundation of Deadpool, essentially, is these series. But for all intents and purposes, I want to focus on what I think is my favorite of Deadpool stories ever, which is, I'll talk about my love of the character a little bit. I want to give everyone a fair shake here. But so, Rob, I'll go through it to you because you're familiar with this a little bit more than I think the other guys are. Yeah, so this is written by, I know you're going to butcher me on how I pronounce this, Rob, but help me out. Fabian Nicieza? God.
Nicieza, right? Is it nice?
Yeah, Nicieza. A very underrated writer, by the way. He's written some great stuff. Yeah, I think so. New Mutants, New Warriors.
Interesting.
I love New Warriors. I straight up love it. I think it's great. Was that?
I say he's.
Thank you. So he's underappreciated. He's done a lot. He's done a lot for X-Force, you know, and so like he's done for me. He's been more important of a fixture for the '90s comics than people give him credit for. But this is Joe Madureira's first run material besides Savage Dragon 3. I guess I didn't realize it was him that I'm familiar with. So Rob, talk about your history
Vanguard
with Deadpool.
3, not Savage Dragon.
Vanguard, excuse me, Vanguard. Talk about the history of Deadpool a little bit before we get into the review of the book and your familiarity with this series.
Well, I mean, if you really want a good history of Deadpool, you should go check out Robservations, the podcast by Rob Liefeld, and he did a whole episode a year or so ago, maybe 2, but he did a whole episode going through his creation of Deadpool, like, and the whole story about selling Deadpool to Marvel, everything, pretty in depth. So I would say I didn't realize Deadpool was supposed to be a wise ass until I read this issue. Like, it didn't come across to me like in the X-Force stuff as much. Like,
interesting,
quippy,
really?
but not more than Spider-Man. I didn't really get that. Because when I first read this on the recommendation of Wizard Magazine, right? Wizard Magazine thought to read this issue. So I was like, all right, man, I'll go check this out. I realized it's not a funny book. It's not a funny book. It wants to be funny, but it's not a funny book. I don't like any of the jokes. And so my thoughts in 1993 were this, because I've always wanted to get them out in public, so here we'll do it. I really felt that Deadpool at the time probably should have been like a Bill Paxton from like Weird Science.
Oh.
Like sort of an asshole, wise ass, Hudson from Aliens, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if you were going to lean on that dialogue, you lean on some of that. You lean on some of Bruce Willis from Moonlighting, Die Hard. And this to me, I remember at the time I'm going, this should be like Tango and Cash. It's two cops who are like rivals that are looking or trying to protect a girl, Terry Hatcher, right? And that's kind of what this is trying to do, but it doesn't tell it in any kind of cinematic way. It's in this comic book way where you have to read like 2 other issues and then it jumps around. Doesn't really have a very straightforward narrative. Should have just had an A story and a B story. Deadpool and dealing with Kane, and then Vanessa on her thing, and then the bad guy sort of at the end of the story. It gets there, but it doesn't really like kind of form what it wants to be till maybe the last 5 pages. So that's from the storytelling. But the art I thought was great at the time, particularly because Joe Mad did something that I always thought was funny. He gives the villain Slayback, right?
Yeah.
He gives the villain Liefeld's trademark grin. The diamond grin, right? Like Liefeld has a way of drawing this like triangular grin. It's like a play off Art Adams, but it's very specific the way Liefeld does it. And Slayback ends up having this grin, and I was like, oh, okay. And I knew this at the time. Like as an artist, I'm seeing the styles, and I'm like, oh, what if Slayback was more of like what if that was more of a punch at Liefeld because he had already left for Image? You know what I mean? Like it would have been more interesting to Slayback. Or if it had been Sinister, whoever created Wade, you know what I mean, if he had to fight his own creator, I thought would have been a more interesting thing at the end. So, again, given what was going on at Marvel Comics, is this better than most of that? Probably. I mean, the art saves a lot of it for me. But, again, like Weasel, I always saw Weasel as Curtis Armstrong, also from Moonlighting, and Booger from Revenge of the Nerds and Better Off Dead. Yeah, he was in Better Off Dead. And he looks like a weasel in the first issue, but then by the 3rd issue, he's like off model. He's like kind of manly. So I don't know. Like, I think there's some really great stuff, but Kane versus like a Weapon X, this is like, Kane's like Sylvester Stallone and Wade's like Kurt Russell meets Bill Paxton to me. And that sort of everyman wise ass, and I like the idea that I'm not going to spoil anything, but I like the bits at the end. It's kind of Iron Giant-y in a way at the end, like some of the stuff there. Mm-hmm. And so, which I didn't have that thought in 93, but I like the end. It's just the getting there it's hard with these books to recommend them to people because they're not, although I think the people are writing them see a movie in their head. They don't write them in a movie in which you go into a film, you don't need to have any prior knowledge before you read the story or watch the movie, really. Unless now you like a Marvel movie, you need to know like 9 movies before you go in there. But I just think like I wish there was a way to coalesce this story into something a little bit more straightforward. But Joe Mad's art, the dude was 16, guys. I don't know what to say. Like,
Wait, he was 16?
yeah.
That is crazy.
I mean, you got a dude worked in the mailroom. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's 16, 17-year-old Joe Mad here. You know, like, right?
Wow.
So like, I know like a lot of the people out of my peers try to like, I'm gonna draw like Joe Mad. I'm like, I don't think you draw like Joe Mad. I think you're either born Joe Mad or not.
Yeah.
So like, and all of us
Wow.
are not. Yeah. So
Wow.
overall, man, like I said, I love the art, but I'm not a fan of Fabian Niciez's writing. So
Interesting. All right. So put a cap in that. Or a feather little pin in that. We'll come back. All right, Ryan. You said before you knew your X-Men comics in the '90s. So how familiar if you know Extinction Agenda? I know for a fact that New Mutants '98 happened right after Extinction Agenda. So how familiar were you with Deadpool, and then your history with the character, and then fill us in on that.
So I sort of had to backtrack because I kind of dipped out of New Mutants as Cable left to X-Force, and I sort of hopped into that.
Okay.
But a lot of my exposure to Deadpool early on was just seeing the art, and then as it sort of evolved through all these different artists like Scotty Young, and I think we talked about was it Jason Pearson earlier. Those are kind of my two favorite designs. Like they were just sort of like frenetic lines, and you kind of saw the way they evolved from Liefeld's original drawing. You see from Liefeld's design now to then how drastically different they are, and how the black circles around the eyes have shrunk, and he's less emotive. And so I didn't read a ton of Deadpool. That's why I was super excited when you recommended Circle Chase, because it was something I'd always sort of had on the back burner wanting to get to. And when I read it, I agree with Sketch that there was a lot going on. The storyline was going in too many directions. Like we get, Black Tom and Juggernaut for like half an issue, and it's, kind of just a plot device to kind of get him from one location to the next. But I thought like talking about the artwork, and we showed that splash page a second ago, like every episode, those splash pages rock. They were so good. And they just kind of get you excited. Like that one right there is incredible.
This is probably my favorite Deadpool drawing maybe ever. I think
That sold on Heritage not too long ago. So if you guys want to see like a high res version of the inks, you can go onto Heritage Auctions if you just create an account, and then you can dig it up and see the high res.
It's
super good.
This is a phenomenal looking double splash page. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Anyway, I apologize, Ryan. Continue.
No, it's okay. But in the end, I think sticking through it, knowing it was a shorter 4-part limited series, I really liked the payoff in the end, and it was all kind of worth it to kind of stick with it and get through. And I love the message at the end. I mean, we're 25 years in, so I don't know if spoilers are a big thing, but
we'll keep it as light as we can. But
just sort of the fact of finding out what the weapon was, and it was sort of this ironic twist at the end was really cool, and it just kind of brought it home for me.
Yeah, no, so you didn't. I know you didn't have much experience with Deadpool. Did you read any of his comics before?
I am trying to think of the. I read part of Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, thumbing through that, and some of the stuff, the Deadpool Spider-Man stuff that kind of came maybe 10, 15 years later. But it wasn't a big Deadpool. Loved the character, and obviously all my roots in my fandoms were from that universe. But I knew way more about the X-Men and X Factor and those guys.
Yeah, Deadpool was we'll dissect the story a lot more. I knew Rob was going to be a little harsher on this one, but at the same time, we'll talk about that. But
There's Hillary Clinton jokes, guys. Like, I'm not trying to like. It's not. It wasn't funny then. It's not funny. I don't get it. You know, I don't get. And it's not that there weren't. I gotta understand. Like, my background, like, to comics, to me, humor is there are the. It seems weird. I'm drawing a humorous book. It's actually quite coincidental, but humor for me is what drew me into comics. Like, when I read the Turtles. Like the first Turtle series, there was badasses, but there was humor as it goes along, real, genuine, like, jokes, you know? And so then I find Roach Mill, I find Tick, you know, I find, like, these different books you sort of discover through. And around this time, I think Johnny the Homicidal Maniac is just about to come out, you know? So it's around this time.
Yeah.
So, like, I am primed for a jokey character because he seemed more like Snake Eyes, I think, more in the New Mutants and X-Books, right?
Sure. I think he was still trying. I think they were still trying to find their way with him and the tone of him. You know, he started and he's really in New Mutants '98. He's Deathstroke, right? Like, as much as Rob doesn't want to say that he has anything to do with him, I mean, he's Deathstroke, and then he gets this limited series, and he's kind of just quippy and has, you know, one-liners and that at times aren't landing, and they're still trying to find their voice with him. And it isn't until like that 20 issue run where he gets like his full series where he's breaking the fourth wall and he's like, you know, sort of the iteration that we're more familiar with.
Rob even said in his podcast that he considers Joe Kelly the unofficial co-creator in that sense, because the voice, I mean, that's the voice of Deadpool, the Ryan Reynolds like thing you hear starts in this, you know.
Interesting.
I mean, there's some of it in the Mark Waid stuff, but not really. I mean, you know, like, again, it's like it's just hard. I think what's hard about writing Deadpool at this time is that the books have the comics code, you know, and it's like you really want them to go full bore with "I'm gonna murder you," and like, this is '93, so, like, you know, like Reservoir Dogs is already out. And I'm like, give me that Tarantino. Like, it feels like it needs to go in that direction, but it can't. You know, it's like, so we'll make, you know, Hillary jokes. I mean, it was a double-page spread of this stuff, guys. You know,
right? No, I get you. We'll talk. So right. That's perfect. That's a good segue for Carlos here. Carlos, I know you're a DC guy. So how familiar were you with Deadpool back in the day? Did you know them? Did you care about him? Yeah, give me your history of Deadpool before we get into we break down the series a little bit.
Yeah, like, I had a bit of exposure to Deadpool because, like, back then, being a young kid in the '90s, there's only so much money that a guy can generate from delivering flyers, right? So I was big into DC, and I'd buy loads of DC books, and then I had a buddy who was very much like Ryan, where he was like X-Men super fan, and so he was reading the Uncanny books and the
X-Men Blue and Gold.
Yeah, the X-Men Blue and Gold stuff and New Mutants at the time, and like, we'd quite often get together on Saturday and do the comic store run, pick up our books from the file, and I would read all the Marvel books and he would read all the DC books because those aren't the ones that we're going home with, right? So I had some exposure to Deadpool, but honestly, like, it wasn't the thing that really drew me to those books. And then especially once they did X-Men #1, like the Jim Lee book, when they launched X-Force, it all kind of felt really try-hardy because I was really enjoying the X-Men stuff, and so I kind of wrote off a lot of the things that were happening with the other mutant characters. And then once Image became a thing and all those creators left, like, you could really, really feel Marvel just kind of scrambling for that period of time. So I don't know, like, I didn't really latch onto the character, and then I was aware, like, the Joe Kelly run and how popular that was, but then by that point in time, like, I'd had such a consistent history reading comic books that I kind of had a bit of comic snobbery, and I turned my nose up at anybody who would be like, "Oh, I like comics too." I was like, "Yeah, what do you read?" "Oh, I like Deadpool," and it's just what type of thing. So
right.
And that just compounded infinitely more, like, once the movies came out and stuff like that. But Yeah, I don't know. Like the character always seemed to have a hard time kind of finding his place, and kind of like Rob said, like they could only go so far, and you could see where there was a potential for the character to kind of thrive in an R-rated space, but they're playing with the comics code thing at the time, and then also it often got propped up as like the Marvel answer to a lot of the things that DC was doing in their Vertigo line.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then you read that through that lens back then or even now, and it's just so not that it falls really short. And it's like, well, I don't know. Like I can appreciate the character and I can see what the appeal is, but yeah, and I think honestly that's part of why you asked me to be on this show. 'Cause you kind
Yeah.
of knew where I'd be
No,
coming from more so than the other guys. Because
I
Yeah.
have a question. I have a
yeah.
question.
Yeah, sure.
So,
Please.
have you all had a chance to hear Rob Liefeld just like talk like when he's enthusiastic about things?
Dude,
Yeah.
I listened to observations for like I haven't listened to it in a while, but the first like year and a half they're great. I love that stuff.
So Rob Liefeld is Deadpool, really. I mean, if you hear Rob talk like that's it. Like that is straight up Deadpool. So, I just think because he left Marvel, like had he not left Marvel, if someone could have just like recorded him, like if you just we wrote some stuff, but just ramble on. If they had just recorded half the stuff he says and filled the word balloons in, I think it would have made a lot more sense. Like they're very very alike. Yeah.
Um, so I'll kind of talk about this series a little bit and why I picked it for our prep for the movie that's coming out here. Partly, listen, I will admit that this series, me rereading it, it definitely wasn't as good as I remembered it being. I'll be honest. I liked it a lot. I liked it a lot when I was a kid. A lot. I still like it. I don't think it's as bad as Rob's kind of saying it was back in the day. I'm sure he probably feels the same way, but we'll get to him in a second. But a couple things I want to talk about this series. Joe Mad's art is incredible. The reason why we reread comic books is because the art, the letters and the dialogue help push narrative and establish certain things sometimes, but the art is why we read comics. And the art obviously speaks for itself. The art is incredible.
Well, it's not a comic book until you draw something. Otherwise, it's a book.
Exactly. If, for instance, like if there's anyone else, like Ian Churchill, this is nothing against Ian Churchill. If Ian Churchill drew this series, I probably wouldn't like it as much, to be quite honest. But Joe Mad's artwork is so good. If he's 16 years old and this good of a storyteller, that's insane to me. Because look at this. This is so good. Like you have like the arm, the left far left panel with Kane's arm, and he's got it's 3 panels, but it's like because it's you're trying to give you the idea of the time, going off with the bullets coming out of it. It's just like chef's kiss. It's so good. That's come on, it's so good. And there's so much detail here in a page like this.
He works in a lot of the Liefeld shapes, so like he's mixing in like Art Adams and Liefeld, but then he's giving it a 3-dimensionality that sometimes Rob stuff is more graphic designy, right?
Yeah.
And this is,
right.
you can see like it's fully rendered, like it's a 3-dimensional arms, like it's.
So really quickly, I just want to say this artwork has been entrenched in my mind about Deadpool since it came out. So whenever I think about Deadpool, I don't think of the movies. I don't think of Rob Liefeld. I think of Joe Mad's circle chase run arc. And stuff like this is why I adore this page. The guns like blast is like a circular. It's like, it's so good. I think it's gorgeous art. This art is insanely good. Anyway, when I was reading this book back in the day, as a kid, it made sense to me. And I always thought the Deadpool works in that PG-13 rating. I reject the excessive R-rated stuff because of this book, because it's not. Is it like super over the top funny? Like, is Fabian like an amazing humor writer? No, I'm not. I don't think so. But there's enough quips and funny things for me for Deadpool that I like it. Like this works for me. And I definitely agree with, I think it was Carlos. You said that, or one of you said, oops, sorry, that you could tell they're struggling with the voice. I'm not sure it was you, I forgot who it was, but you could tell they're struggling with the voice of this character. And I think in retrospect, I see that now more so than I did back then. Because as we know, I mean, because I had read a number of, not all the appearances of Deadpool, but I had read a lot. I have read this one, I had read this one, like both these issues, like a million times. And there is a humor aspect, but and Rob, I think you said he's more like Spider-Man. He's quipping, and I think that works. And you can get him to be a little raunchier or whatever. That's fine. But again, I didn't really discover I have not read a single issue of the Joe Kelly run. And I know, and again, I promise we will do that eventually because I do need to read it. The thing for me is I didn't discover this version of Deadpool until he got his new ongoing series with Daniel Way. So, and I like that run. That run's fine, but I always look at this series fondly because he's a more toned down Deadpool, and I don't know. There's some good stuff here, but we'll get into the specifics. But I will say this: reading this, I was really excited to read it because I love the art so much. Reading it this time, I will agree. Ryan made a good point. It's definitely clunkier. There's like Juggernaut and Black Tom are kind of thrown in there. Now, I'm going to push back a little bit and say you're right. But for me, as an X-Force and X-Men fan, sometimes I don't care about that stuff. I'm like, give me Juggernaut and Black Tom every comic. I'm going to love it, So there's that. But also the fact that he was following up on a thread that Rob did back in issue 3 of X-Force when he got blasted by Cable, I think it was. And, if Fabian obviously was one writing that, he wanted to follow that up. So he gave it, we obviously have, he followed up with this book here and Deadpool. And I like when they kind of interchange things and everything. And for those who don't know, Mr. Tolliver is another X-Force thing that was all, entrenched in here that it's not revealed in this story, but Mr. Tolliver is Cable's son.
Right.
And that's why Zero, the android, is in the book because Strife is from, all that stuff. It's a whole man.
Yeah,
X-Men,
but that's not a narrative. That's everything you hate about a movie or a TV series. You're like, oh yeah, but this is really big because on this one novel something happened, and that's why this is happening. It's not really important to the story. I think and this was my feeling at the time, the most cinematic version of the Juggernaut I had ever seen in a comic before reading this was Juggernaut's appearance in Spider-Man 15 that Todd McFarlane drew. Where like fighting, it took like all of X-Force plus Spider-Man to fight the Juggernaut, and he was like unstoppable. He's like a giant. He's like the cement truck chasing Beverly Hills Cop 2. Like, how do you chasing a cement truck? So he's a cement truck. And in this book, you're like, it felt like it should be leading up to a Juggernaut fight, and it's like in the middle, and it kind of just disappears. Like I love the idea. If you tell me on paper, Kane and a Weapon X dude and Deadpool got to team up to find their girlfriend who's hunting down a secret or something, and they're globetrotting, right? We're one step behind her, she's one step in front of them, and chasing them all down as the Juggernaut. You know what I mean? Like that's you in your mind you can imagine everything but what we get. You know what I mean? Like it's a shame that True Lies hadn't come out yet when this came out, because there's some of that Tom Arnold has a little bit of that Deadpool-y voice in him too. Like if you could kind of get a globetrotting wise ass, you could change Arnold Schwarzenegger out. Like if Arnold Schwarzenegger was Kane and Deadpool was like a in shape Tom Arnold, you could sort of see like. But the Cable stuff is this. It's just frustrating when you see a guy who has robotic arms and a cable eye, but you don't get Cable. You're like, you almost feel like you're like, I'm being teased. I'd rather just have the Cable.
I didn't think of him being like a Cable character, but you're right. But listen, those are all fair. I will say this, and I want to throw it to the guys here as well. But I just want to say that when I reread it, it definitely is clunkier than I remember, and it was a little disappointing. I will admit, like I was reading, I'm like, oh man, it's not quite as good, but I like the tie-in stuff because I mean, for me, like there's the Tolliver thing, which by the way, I didn't find out Mr. Tolliver was Cable's son until Jeff Loeb told me in person when I visited Everett Comics and Cards when him and Tim Sale were there promoting Long Halloween. And just for the record, I didn't know that was even the case. I go to Everett Comics and Cards again now, and I was talking to who's now the owner, but he was working there at the time. And I said, yeah, I was here when Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale were here. Oh yeah, they're promoting Long Halloween. I went, what? I had no idea. Anyway, Jeff Loeb was a very kind person. Him and Tim were very great. So anyway, by the way, this series, I think it's still worth checking out. The art alone is worth just reading it by itself, but there's some interesting things they introduce here quick. I want to throw out there is they show the deformity of Wade's face. That's the first time we get that is in this series. And we're getting the ideas of like, Vanessa and Deadpool and, the history. And I don't know, there are some good things here. Yeah. It's compressed. A lot's compressed into here. And I will say this too. I'm not sure if Slayback ever came back, but the way Joe Mad drew him, he looks phenomenal. I love Slayback. I thought he looked great. So anyway, Ryan, I'll throw it to you and then Rob will go next after that. Ryan, reading this, so you give me your kind of little details. You talked a little bit, but give me some more details about the story. Anything you liked a lot about this? You can say the art. Yeah. Just what else did you like and maybe dislike here?
I mean, at its core, obviously, with the films, they're playing up to Deadpool is a love story. And, there was a love element, if going back to his relationship with Vanessa and the way that unfolds in the end and sort of the like heartbreak, but the way Wade sort of gets over it in his own Wade kind of, way, kind of gloating over what eventually happens with Zero. So, that was part of the payoff for me was seeing that, him and Vanessa had this falling out, but they still both loved each other. And the natural progression going through the story would have been for a happy ending, but Wade doesn't get happy endings. And,
no.
And so, it was very fitting, but it was told in a really good way. And for me, that was the payoff for me.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, I agree with that. Just by the way, I just want to say for the record, before I go to you, Rob, is I'm bummed out that the movies never gave me this Vanessa. I liked Vanessa. Like I liked the fact she was a shapeshifter.
Yeah.
And good.
They still
what?
Yeah. I haven't given you that yet.
Well, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I'll keep it there. So I do like this Vanessa a lot. I liked the way Fabian wrote Vanessa in the series. I thought she was actually a cool character. I will admit the ending is I like Ryan. I'm with you. I like what they did with the ending. Was it completely out of nowhere? A little bit, but at the same time, it worked for me. I still like how it worked. And yeah. So Rob, I'm assuming I already know what you're gonna say about this series, but maybe not. I don't know what as you reread it now.
Well,
give me some positives. Give me some positives.
Yeah, but
story.
like I like the idea of him and a girlfriend. I mean, like I grew up loving Moonlighting as a kid. All right, like Moonlighting was a show where it's the first time I saw the fourth wall get broke. Like I remember watching an episode and they were doing a scene and then they just walked behind the TV cameras and the crew and they just saw the whole soundstage and they went into the next scene and they never mentioned it. Like that happened in the show, like, and you were just like, what am I watching? Like, so to me, this is like Maddie and David. This is like, Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis to an extent, they can't really get together, like something's always going to keep them apart.
Yeah.
And so, I just wish she was a central character because she's lost. She kind of comes and goes. And so I love
Agreed. Yeah.
If the A-B story is this Tango versus Cash buddy cop team up, right? To go save this chick or find her, right? Wade wants to save her. Kane wants to find her to get the whatever. and then the villain is just like, you know, like Slayback doesn't really. He's a great visual because Joe Mad's doing something here, but he's not really much of a villain. The Agent Zero thing is an interesting. There's a really great way his face has a zero and it's like slowly appearing in a in a circle as a timer, and like that's why I said the ending is a good ending. Fabian wrote a good ending, and Joe drew it, and they did that in a way without digital effects or anything. Just the way they did that, very Watchmen-esque in a way, like the way that's sort of timed and everything. But characters like Weasel, like, I just want more of like that Weasel aspect of the guy in the chair, who's like there's a Curtis Armstrong's. He's also a Moonlighting of all things. There's a great scene in Better Off Dead when John Cusack's character's got to go down this giant mountain called the K-12, right? And it kills everyone who goes down. And he's like, and his buddy goes, "All right, man, it's okay. Let me tell you what to do. You go down the hill really fast, and if something gets in your way, turn." and the way Curtis sells that, like he's being serious, like he really figured it out, you know, like it's not a joke. And Cusack's just like, you know, like I'm dead. I'm a dead man. And so like a guy who's supposed to have all the answers but doesn't, you know, like doesn't really have the answers, is sort of more of a foil. It's those combinations that I think like classic comic book writers don't really like hone in on. They get bogged down into tying into this issue or that issue, or there's all this backstory and these things are related. And I get that, but like that should inform you writing. It shouldn't be necessary to the reader to understand. Like this whole side thing with these three characters where you go inside Wade's head and there's a virtual reality thing, you could cut that out. Like it serves zero purpose. Yeah. This is a whole nother story. You're like, this is a different thing entirely. You know, I don't get, unless it opened up that way. Like it opened up, like I thought it opened up where, because like the bad guy, Black Tom had died or something, right? So if it had opened up with him killing Black Tom or something, but he's in that virtual thing, you know, like, and then Kane breaks him out and saves him in a way, and they kill those people, and then they're stuck together to go find Vanessa. Like that's a way to sort of rearrange those elements so that they move everything forward. But there's this, when you read it, it's like, I'm not harping on Star Wars to harp on Star Wars, but there's this new series Acolyte, and I say it's probably the weirdest edited thing I've ever seen professionally put out in the world. Like, because it feels like someone just hacked things up and there's whole chunks of stuff missing. It does this thing in this series where it just jumps somewhere to some other country, and you're like, all right, now I'm following this, and then it jumps back to, then there's this other thing, and now I'm over here, now I'm in Scandinavia, but there isn't like a map where we got to go on to here to here to here to here, and the way Indiana Jones would take you on to a logical step forward. And I think like, and man, I've had conversations with writers and they look at me like, you don't get it, Rob. I'm like, maybe you don't understand why people throw these comics away, you know, and just give up, because like you're trying to impress yourself, and don't impress yourself. The impression to me are I care about characters, and plot is like how do I explain it to me? If Deadpool went down the street to go buy a Slurpee and came back, you know that's going to be fun because the character Deadpool is a fun character, and whatever happens is going to be, the plot is irrelevant. The fact that I have to have a Black Tom who's tied to a Juggernaut who had a dude and he's the son of a something, and then they go over here to go there. That's some shit that's impressing you and your friends in the editor's room, man. That's not why you're coming back, you know, to the page. So this is just one of those things, and I felt that way then, and you know. I was a much more wise-ass kid about it at Comic-Con when I go to the Marvel still had a booth in 93. That went away 95, 96, I can't remember which one. That's a whole long story. They got mad that... No, Comic-Con got mad that they were selling cookies. They were giving away cookies, and Comic-Con was... Yeah, this is a separate story, folks. There was a whole problem with cookies. Marvel was giving away cookies, and Comic-Con threw a fit, and then Marvel decided not to go back to Comic-Con for the longest time. It was a whole thing. But... wow! Yeah, that really happened. But like, I almost wish, guys, there was a way to take this and go, you know what? You know how they remake? You know, we remake movies all the time. Why can't we remake this? Like, can we get, like, you know what I mean? Can we just streamline the story and tell something more straightforward and get Joe Mad? Like, can we get him back and just go, you know what? We're going to do a remake of this and actually make it. give it maybe an extra issue, so you got some space now, 5 issues instead of 4. And but you know, he probably would draw it on 8.5 by 11 paper these days. He doesn't really draw big up, you know, for time.
You know,
So
I'm going to push back a little bit. I think the tie-ins they work well. I think Juggernaut Black Tom is yeah, it's loosely, you didn't need to have it, but I enjoy it. It's fine for, I think it's
a
fine.
mini series should be a self-contained story.
I think it's, for the most part,
it should be a self-contained story. Otherwise, it needs to fit in like I think they had X-Men Unlimited at the time, which was like telling like roundabout stories, you know, like Bachala did the first issue. So like either this exists in X-Force for like 3-4 issues, you know, or it was just like, I think they didn't have a place to put it in the X-Force because it's not X-Force and X-Men. So they're like, we'll do this thing. But I've always felt, you know, argue me till the day I die, that if you do a miniseries, it should read like a mini movie, you know, and let the continuing series be the TV show.
Before I throw it to Carlos here, one thing I will say that, listen, I knew what Fabian was going for. It's for different, obviously it's like different rogues. He's going through like the circle of like different characters. So I think that's like, there's a motif there. I agree that it's maybe tied into continuity. That's also why I love this stuff. And I feel like Deadpool is, I mean, at the time was a deep cut still, right? So he's tailor-made for people like me and Ryan, and who are like buying X books on the reg, and they want us to buy the Deadpool stuff. So it makes sense to put Juggernaut and Black Tom in the series. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong either, but I do think there is.
Yeah, but you lead up to a Juggernaut. Juggernaut's you got to start out with a Juggernaut, or you lead up to a Juggernaut. A Juggernaut on an airplane. Look, that's funny in of itself that you got this giant dude sitting in an airplane.
I love that picture, by the way. It's so
but
good.
it doesn't go far enough in the way that, think about if you watch anime like Studio Trigger, whenever they would do like a Kill la Kill where they push something further and further. When you have a cartoonish character like that, and if you're going for the cartoon, you're not going for like God Loves Man Kills Juggernaut, right? You're going right? You're going for sort of a fun tongue-in-cheek Juggernaut. McFarlane drew the fun, badass, giant, cartoony Juggernaut in that issue of Spider-Man. So if that's the one you're kind of going for, like, it needs to, like, the plane shouldn't even, like, okay, the plane's lifted. That's a whole nother thing, right? Like, then they have a, like there should be a thing where, like, they blow a hole in the side of the plane and not one person's chucked out. And this is like, I only have one gripe on the art, and it was, and I felt this way then. There's this thing where Deadpool throws out a line to save Black Tom, like he throws out like a rope, and the rope is drawn like with a .4 mechanical pencil, and it's like, you just knew that would rip his hand. It should have just ripped his hand right off. I want to say this would be the funny joke. He throws it, he goes to grab it, and it just cuts his hand. Like, but you can't do that in a comics code book. like there's a scene where Wade goes to kill one of these useless chicks and he guts her, but they gotta like draw around it in a way where you're like, why even bother with the joke at that point? Or it's not even a joke, it's just violence, but funny violence where I'm trying to help you, but like I end up decapitating or and then everyone goes, that guy's a freaking villain. Like, no, I'm really not. I'm trying to help. Like you know, I mean, hey, by the way, problem diffused. He's definitely not going to hurt anybody now. He doesn't even have a hand.
Right.
And then they just fall out the, It would have been funny if it had ended with those two, like him having to like cut to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and Black Tom is just like sailing on top of Juggernaut, because you know he's got floating, because Juggernaut would be like this, right? And he's got like a little boat sail, you know, and he's just like riding him back to shore or something.
Okay, couple things I'm gonna throw to you, Carlos. First of all, about Juggernaut, the plane lifting, you have a great point. But the way around that is, I always thought Juggernaut, he was more, that only happened when he had his special suit on. That's the way I looked at it. So you could argue that point, but yeah, I think you're right on that. That part was I liked it, but yeah, the plane lifts up. It's because of that. The last thing I'm going to say,
or
you, Ryan,
or there could have been a gag where they're like, we need, due to weight restrictions, we need some people to leave, and the flight's delayed while like everyone has to get off but those two guys, so they don't have to worry about passengers being on. It's like, you know what I mean? Like they bought out all the seats, or even if they bought out all the seats because the weight would only take a Juggernaut, you know? Like, there's a way to do it.
No, those are good. Those are good things. This is why I love having you on the show so much, because you always give me good insight and like ideas. So I love that.
Oh no,
Really
then they
quick-
ignore you. Then they ignore you, the writers.
I don't ignore you, Rob. I love you. I love you. So, Ryan, I just want to say for the record, when did Wade become a middle linebacker for?
Yeah, Jesus, he's so built right there in that picture.
No, dude, he's about to go play like Levon Kirkland or something like that, you know, like back in the day. Because like
you know what this reminded me of when I first saw it, and I believed it because of the way Joe Matt drew is. I'm like, this is Ken Masters from Street Fighter and his girlfriend,
dude,
right? Like
Yeah.
I'm a Street Fighter nut, right? And Ken is my favorite dude. And when I remember reading this, I'm like, that's Ken, and that's his hot girlfriend at the end of the game, right? Like
dude,
That's
it's
good.
like, yeah, it's. I remember thinking like, why is he built like a linebacker in this picture? He looks so like thick, dude. Like,
Yeah, I was
it's
like, is this Aquaman? Like, what's happening right now?
yeah, right. I mean, it's a little interesting. His he shrunk down a little bit. Carlos, so reading the story, tell me what, you know, you're very kind of, sounds like you're vaguely familiar with Deadpool. What's your take on this story and everything?
Well, yeah, like I started it, and like you had done a bit of a sell job to you're like, yeah, this is like it's self-contained Joe Madura art, and it's kind of the
Got
thing
you.
that launches everything, so you don't really have to have any
Yeah.
previous knowledge of the book. So I was like, yeah, sure, we'll dive in and kind of get into it. And you know, the book opens with Deadpool in Yugoslavia, and I was like, okay, well, with the historical context for what was going on there in the 90s, I was like, that's interesting and good on them for kind of playing in that ballpark. But then it kind of goes all over the place, and
Yeah.
there's no continuity or flow to the story. And so then I'm thinking, well, it's 4 issues, and we've established that this Tolliver's will is going to be at the center of this whole thing. So maybe it's the big kind of MacGuffin chase type story where you're going to have these competing groups that we're going to drop in and out of throughout the entire story. And I kind of get to the middle of the second issue. I was like, well, I don't know that this book knows exactly what it wants to be, type of thing.
Fair.
So I struggle with it a bit, but then you kind of get into some of the stuff with Vanessa, and I started to look at the book and the read, and for the purpose of this show, as being more of a historical document as to this is what the genesis of Deadpool was, where we see that transition from the character that Liefeld introduced in the X-Force book into what he kind of blossoms into via Nicaea and the subsequent writers type of thing. So once I started reading it through that context, I enjoyed it a lot more. I thought it really
Nasabala.
Yeah.
Nasabalua. Sorry.
I thought it kind of failed as a mini series, because I was always of the opinion that the mini series should always be best foot forward and one of those few things, especially in the 90s, that they ever offered for new readers. For, you know, those 4-issue arcs would be the only things that would get put into graphic novel form. They'd rarely, if ever, collect your mainline books and off you go type of thing. So just kind of reading it with 2024 eyes, I thought it was a bit bizarre that it was so heavily connected to previous stories and things that this book doesn't really touch on. But by the time we got to the end and the end game plays out and the book kind of finds a voice, and you almost felt like that last issue was the story they meant to be telling the entire time. But they were just like, shoot, we got lost in the sauce a little bit. So
am I wrong though, Carlos? Like when Vanessa appears, you go, this feels like the story we should have been getting around issue 1. Like, you know, like, yeah, like right when we cut from Wade and Kane, it should have gone right to her and what she, you know, where's Vanessa? And then here's what Vanessa's doing. Like it just, yeah, it is odd.
Yeah, like the love lost type of story. And then well, and the other thing too is that I found it interesting that the character that almost has the least amount of focus until you get to issue 3 is actually Deadpool. Like you don't really get that much insight, and you're seeing the machinations of all these other players, and so many of them are of no consequence by the time you get to
That's
the
fair.
meat and potatoes of the book. Whereas, like Rob said, if you focus on, like, Kane is a great foil for Deadpool in this because he can bring that Weapon X history, and that's going to inform a lot of where you're taking Wade Wilson going forward. And then obviously with Vanessa, like, she's a key character to his history and informing where they want to have that character after the fact, with where that relationship dissolves at the end of this 4 issues type of thing. So yeah, it was an interesting reading experiment. I don't know that it was the strongest book in the world, but
Sure.
I think it's kind of cool to go back and see some of these things and see some of the pieces of this puzzle that have lasted to this day. And
Let's be honest. If it wasn't for the art, you would have bailed, though, right? Like,
yeah,
like
I got.
Let's be honest.
No,
Joe
that's
Madden's. Yeah. Well, no, I wouldn't have bailed because I did commit to our guy Paul here for.
Right, but if you weren't
being on the
committed to
show.
this show, you were just handed this, right? You ain't picking up the second issue.
Oh yeah,
Like,
no, I would have
Well,
thumbed through the subsequent issues and just been like, oh yeah, that's a great splash. And
I
that's a
just
great
say
set of
that.
panels.
Look,
But
I say that because the complaint today is that everyone goes, oh, not everyone, but there's a strong online gripe about modern comics and how, like, they weren't how they used to. And I'm like, no, man, there's a lot of bullshit back in the day, dude. Like, a lot of, like, can't believe this is $3.99 and it's 1993 $3.99. You know,
Yeah.
That's a Blockbuster
Fair,
video
dude.
rental, right?
That's fair.
That was my allowance. So, you know, this thing was like, it does help that, yeah, they got this wonderkind, you know, on this. But I bring up the miniseries format, Carlos, and you mentioned it too, but it's not like we didn't have anything to compare it against at the time, because you had The Dark Knight Returns, you had Batman Year One, you had Batman Year Two. These are self-contained stories, and it's not like Marvel was trying to be like, yeah, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna, like, make all these, like, what was Magneto Zero? Like, what was that? Because that was like the same year, you know, as this came out.
Well,
where it had like a black cover with a really cool piece of art, and then you read it and you're like, what is this?
And Gambit both had similar miniseries that had the same kind of dressing as this does. It has like the side, like, angle thing, right? Am I right on that, Ryan? I think, I'm not sure if you got those issues, but like Sabretooth had one, Gambit, Dead. So, and that, again, I want to push back a little bit because I do think, again, back to my earlier point, these miniseries weren't really supposed to be for new fans necessarily, which I'm not saying was right, but I'm just saying, like, they were generated
That's
for.
Not true. That's not true, because they were dealing with the Image situation right now, so they were trying to juice up new younger readers into these different books.
But I don't think they would. But I yes, to a point. But the thing is, they also have to depend on, like, people like me and Ryan, who are going to buy these books because we already know who they are and we were interested in getting them. That's why they entrench it with these stories. Because I don't think the Tolliver Wills thing, like, it's a MacGuffin. It works, because I had no idea what it is, and it works. It works fine. And I think the one commonality about all this, I think is really cool, is we all agree the 4th issue is actually pretty good. Like, it's the best issue overall. And you're right, Rob, that they should have done this from the start. I agree with that. And
well, it has heart, the 4th issue. It has this part,
it has a lot of heart,
where the Weapon Zero, like, if you stuck around this long, you know, the Weapon Zero says, you're a weapon, you must be destroyed. And he goes, no, I'm not a weapon. Look, I can heal. You know, and that's saying I'm more, it's the Iron Giant moment, right? Like, years later, I'd see a movie called Iron Giant where he goes, I'm not just a weapon, I'm a person. You know, like, I have a soul. Like, there is a genuine, like, heartness to that doesn't exist in anything before it. But that
is fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's maybe why I like the book so much. Because again, as a kid, I'm like, gee, I really like this art by Joe Madura is really good. Oh my God, this guy got this so good. And, you know, just stuff like this is beautiful, man. And, like, the thing is, when I'm reading this, it works. It's fun. It's light. and again, we don't know. What's important also is the context of we don't have Deadpool like as we know him today. It's like Carlos had a great point. This is like the blossoming of Deadpool. It's like the first kind of like just kind of not full bloom, not even close, but it's starting to move that direction and that's what's cool about the story. And yeah, but see, at the same time, I like the fact
guys.
that,
Nysiza, who's writing this, right? These guys are like 30 when they're writing this stuff. All right.
Sure.
So like they grew up with Animal House and Not Ready for Prime Time, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase. And you would just think those guys who grew up with National Lampoons, the guys that grew up, they're in the 80s. And Weird Science is like a kid's movie compared to the humor that they're used to.
And a TV series at this point too.
That is
USA Network.
No, the USA Network does not exist in this.
Don't talk about that. And I love that.
So, and Ferris Bueller already exists. So you would think they would just. Why can't they write humor? But really, because humor's hard. It's super hard to do.
Right. Yeah, it is.
And I mean, remember that Deadpool movie? They spent 7 years on that script, man.
Wow.
That's why those jokes are so good. You're like, yeah, the second one's not as good. Yeah, but they didn't have 7 years, man, to hone that one in. So, but I do think there were people at the time who could have pulled this. Keith Giffen was a guy who could have pulled this off at the time. He was in that wheelhouse, being able to do superhero and humor.
That's a really interesting. That's a shame we never got that. I will say that. We still, by the way, Rob, side note, we need to do our trench show still. So, we'll talk about that sometime soon. All right, let's start wrapping this up. This is great. This has been great because I love the fact that it sounds like not everyone loved it, even including myself. I didn't love it as much as I wanted to because besides the art's just it's so good. You could whatever, right? But I think it's really cool though that there is a silver lining because we all really enjoyed this issue. It does. I think this issue makes it worth reading the other three, which is good. I'm glad that exists for that reason, right? So, yeah, I like Slayback. I like the series still. I have fond memories of it. It kind of made me it made me a legitimate Deadpool fan, to be honest. I liked Deadpool before, but this made me really like the character and bought into him as going forward. So yeah, this has been good. Really quick, we'll do a little round. We'll do a quick little thing here. Give me your excitement levels for Deadpool Wolverine real quick. Ryan, I'll go to you first.
I'm gonna go 100 out of 10. Like total fever pitch. Like
Same.
Hugh in the costume, Hugh with the cowl. I know we haven't seen it in trailers because they're saving it. But yeah, I mean, I'm all in. I've got opening night tickets. I am so excited. I'm so excited to see what sort of characters they bring back. If they, from the Fox universe, what sort of new looks at some of those characters we get. I'm super, super stoked about it. I wanted to bring up one quick thing.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
About your issue of New Mutants 98. I'm so proud that you have avoided getting it graded and sealed for life. I feel like every time you see one of those out in the wild, they've already been captured and thrown in a cage and never to be read ever again. And you still have a copy that you could enjoy, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah,
thank you, man.
Bravo, man. Bravo.
I'll be honest, and this is not an indictment on anyone who slabs. That's their prerogative.
Sure.
It's a whole different culture for me because I was one of those kids, as you could tell, that didn't give an F about their comics as far as selling them. And so I just did not treat them very well to a detriment, to be quite honest. I wish I would have done a little bit better job. But that being said, I'll never slab anything. I have no interest in doing that. And like you said, comics are meant to be read. And you want to keep things nice and whatever. I mean, I don't know next time I'll open this thing up again, but I can still look at it. And there's something to be said about, newsprint paper. I still like newsprint paper. Well, and to be honest, this is for you, Carlos. My last episode, we did the new compact comics for DC Comics here. The
Nice.
paper is not glossy. It's a lot more of a, not, I wouldn't say newsprint. So it's better quality than that, but it's like the nicer quality paper.
Like
But
the
there's no
late
glare.
90s, early 2000s type of paper.
Exactly.
I
And
love going through the thing and seeing all the Super Nintendo ads and remembering the games, like how kick-ass like Konami was at the time and everything they were
dude.
selling. And all the ads for like comic shops in like random parts of the country that were trying to sell back issues.
Mile High, dude. It's good stuff. Right on, man. Well, Rob, I don't know how excited. Are you excited for Deadpool Wolverine?
I told you earlier in the year we did a show. I told you the two things I'm looking forward to the most this year was X-Men 97 and Deadpool Wolverine. So right now I'm 1-0 on that, right? And I'm hoping for 2-0 on it, 1-1. So I'm hoping that this is everything we want it to be. And honestly, man, if it just has the buddy cop thing with a bit of heart, we'll all win. We'll all win and have a good time at the movie theaters.
I think you're right about that one. I forgot. I didn't know if you were I knew you liked X-Men obviously and stuff like that. I just didn't know how much you were into it. Really quickly, did you like the first two Deadpool movies?
Love the first one. Not as big a fan of the second.
It's funny.
And I'll tell you what's missing from the second, and it's this relationship thing. So yeah, I know they killed, Vanessa and then they brought her back at the end. But I think if I were sitting in that writer's room, I would have been like, they can't have kids. Right?
I agree.
That to me is the crux. They want to have kids. And if Deadpool got stuck teaching the Saturday school rejects and they become like his kid, he influences them. He's like, and he becomes their breakfast force, or X-Force could have been like his breakfast. And then you give you the 80s tie-in to like, so you could have spoofed the Breakfast Club with X-Men and Wade just, and Cable and all this bad shit happens because he influences the X-Men in a bad way. So he has to learn to influence them in a positive way, right? The future comes back to hunt him down because he did wrong, then there's your it. That solves those problems. But they kind of try to get around it with improv, and improv can only take you so far if you don't have a core central character bit, and so, yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that because we're the exact opposite. Surprise, surprise. Because I actually love the second one a lot more than the first one. I think the first one's not that great, to be honest.
Yeah, you're mad, man.
You're crazy. You're
mad.
crazy.
I watch groups of grown women just go see Deadpool because there's a love story there, and they had nothing to do with comic books.
Listen, that's fine, and that's fine. I don't think it's very good. It's not as it's great when he's Deadpool.
You're one of those guys that didn't want Otter Pops. You wanted those two things in the center that broke, that were like giant sausages and shit, right? Like the frozen ones, or like an icy guy, right? Yeah, you don't like.
Yeah, who doesn't like ices?
Right, Slurpee's the best.
Slurpee's better. They're the same thing.
Nope, they're not. They're not the same thing.
Well, I would say I'll say this: ices were a lot more. They have a lot more like flavor, in my opinion. I remember the ices having a lot more kick to it than Slurpees.
Madman.
Surprise of the century, me and Rob see opposite ends. But I love that. That's why I love having someone who counters me exactly so we can talk about this stuff. So yeah, I love Deadpool 2. Zazie Beetz, oof, my girl, I'll marry you. Sorry, Morgan, my wife. So anyway, Rob, thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate it. Carlos, can your final thoughts? How excited are you for Deadpool Wolverine?
To be honest, like as you know, like I've struggled with the MCU as of late.
You're a little different.
But yeah, with
you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
I got you. But I've stayed away from the spoilers and the trailers, and I'm excited enough that when tickets went on sale, I locked up a pair of tickets for the wife and I. And one of the things that I always appreciate is like that Fox X-Men set of movies was kind of her gateway into appreciating all this stuff a little bit more, and like when we got married, like her gift to me was like an action figure with my head on
Aw.
kind of Hugh Jackman's body
Aw.
kind of thing, which wasn't easily done back then, type of thing. So,
Oh,
um,
sure, yeah.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And honestly, the thing that really took it home for me was like Xbox did these controllers, and they're basically like tight pants, and that's usually not my thing. But what they did with these controllers to advertise them is they actually put a billboard advertising them in Cold Lake, Alberta, which is
Mhm.
where Wolverine's supposed to hail from. And I was like, you know what? That is such a deep cuts thing to go out and spend the money on, that you can tell that this movie had a lot of love put into it. And so
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
that honestly like supercharged my excitement. Something so stupid. And
No, I
yeah, I
totally get it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I enjoyed the first two well enough. Like my big worry with this one being the first Disney one is that it might get a little trite with the hey, I'm in the Disney universe and kind of all the inside Kevin Feige jokes and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm as optimistic and as excited for a Marvel movie as I've been since Endgame, to be honest with you. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I'm with you. I've avoided pretty much everything as much as I can, within reason. And so I've only seen the trailer a couple times, and I'm super excited, So I mean, this is probably, I mean, if it's as good as I think it's probably going to be, it's 100% going to be my favorite Deadpool movie. Because even though I like the second one more than the first one, I don't love them as much as like, other people do. I'm just not as into them. But at the same time, Deadpool Wolverine looks like it's a lot of fun. I mean, I love Hugh Jackman. He's the shit. So I mean, come on. So
Stay off Twitter. Tonight was the premiere, so there's going to be spoilers everywhere.
I'm going to be pretty much off Twitter, which sucks also because training camp starts now too. So I'm like, okay, how am I going to get training camp in here?
Mute the word Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yes, mute it. Good call.
Yeah, put together a laundry list of muted terms. For
yeah,
that
good. That's a good point. So, all right. So anyway, we'll wrap it up here. Carlos, where can people find you in all your expeditions that you do?
You know what? I dabble kind of once every 4 or 5 weeks with the guys on Vigilante 1939 podcast with our guy Nick Zednick there. We do a bit of kind of movie theater box office stuff on there. Box Office Beyond is our little sub show, and yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Canadian Cape Crusader, and yeah, shout out to our guys Chris Evans and Garrett in the chat there, and yeah, we'll hang in that X space soon.
Yes, we will, and you're coming on next month.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to be doing some Void Rivals.
Void Rivals.
Yeah.
If you know, you know. So,
if you know, you know. Yeah.
If you know, you know. Ryan, you have stuff going on, I believe, right? You got your is it Cincinnati? Is it still going on?
Yeah, I've sort of had to take a step back from that, but I still support those guys, and
okay, cool.
They're still making great content. Kind of busy with the TMZ sports stuff right now, but
that's right. Yeah.
But
so yeah, so I didn't know if you wanted to bring that up or not. So you tell people. So what do you do if you want to tell them? I don't know.
I'm a producer at TMZ Sports and cover the sports and celebrity angle of things right now, but also have a presence online covering the Cincinnati Bengals, and been a football guy for a long time.
Yep. Ryan and we've talked many a times about football. So I always forget that you work for it's TMZ sports stuff. So if you see TMZ sports stuff, he's got his fingerprints on it out there. So, which I know you love that Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce world, right? Oh yeah, I know. One day it'll end. Hopefully. Yeah. One day it will end.
Anyway, that'll be your full-time job, man.
That alone, right? Shoot, man, seriously. Ryan, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We'll get you on. Obviously we got some X-Men stuff coming up sometime. We'll get you on here again. Cool. It was awesome having you on. Thanks again for taking time out. Rob, you've got you got a big week ahead of you, man. You got a big week.
A little bit of a week. So, again, this weekend, Store Spawn Kills Every Spawn. If you like Invader Zim and Calvin and Hobbes and fun superhero-y kind of situational stuff, if you like the backgrounds from a George Perez book, it's got all that in there.
Ooh.
It's got all that in there. And as always, you're going to be suckered out of 20 pages, and you're going to wish you had all the rest in front of you, but you don't yet. So just grin and bear it, like we all have to. They all have to eventually come out, and they're all done except a little bit of the 5th issue. I'm wrapping that up right now. So
attaboy.
Everything's good to go.
I'm super stoked, man. You got a big week ahead of you. You got your book launches. You're going to San Diego Comic-Con. I'm excited. I just really quickly, I'm extending this out to all of you. Next week, we're doing another review of Deadpool Wolverine. I will not be doing it as much because I'm doing it for the MCU fan show. I'm going to save all that for that. I'll obviously give a few insights here and there, but you're all invited to come on and talk about it. I'm not sure what day we're going to do it. We're doing Tuesday, probably, or Wednesday. I think Wednesday. So if you're available, you're all more than welcome to come back. Rob, I'm not sure if you want to talk about the book movie or not.
But maybe next year, whenever we're on next. Good 9 months from now, whenever you're available. I won't be back in studio till the 2nd, so I'm gonna be out for a bit.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, anyway, but I got ideas for our shows in the future, so I'll be hitting you up. So as always. So, and I'm hoping too your YouTube will be coming back while I'll be rejoining. So
we'll see.
That's fair. All right. Anyway, but anyway, if you haven't already, subscribe. All that jazz. Appreciate everyone already has. And since no one else is here, I'll say it. Read or binge more comics. Good night, everybody. See y'all next week.